Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 11:17 Arthur v. Jaku. Chapter 11:17 Arthur v. Jaku. Arthur couldn't help but scoff at the demi-human's arrogant words. Go ahead of me? Was he really expecting that he'd survive this duel after kidnapping one of their prisoners? He'd be lucky if he kept his head. He observed his opponent. The scaled demi-human was no amateur, he could tell that. Even though he displayed a lackadaisical sense of posture, Arthur's sword heart was telling him that there was no obvious weakness in his form. This was really surprising. Even his peers among the order looked like cheese in front of his observant view. Everyone had a weakness. No matter how stiff and guarded they tried to be, Arthur could still easily pick out one or two vulnerabilities within their posture. But this demi-human was the exact opposite. His posture had no form. It looked lazy, with his slouched back, hands free falling to the sides, and his shoulders uneven. Heck, his eyes were not even focused on his opponent. Anyone who even had a basic modicum of fighting knowledge would quickly be able to assess the demi-human as a very vulnerable opponent. But Arthur was much more knowledgeable than most. His sword heart was more mature, allowing him to have intuition unlike any other. And right now, his intuition was telling him that the demi-human was not as vulnerable as he seemed. There was a hidden strength in that lazy posture. It was too lazy. There must be a secret to it. Even a baby would be more guarded. But that's what made it so suspicious. Even the mountains cannot escape justice. Much less someone like you, Arthur said, raising his sword high up in the air. And with a speed surpassing even that of sound, he swung his sword downwards. The red, fiery slash made up of ability power shot through the air. But it wasn't directed at Jaku. Instead, it headed straight towards the orcs attempting to descend back into the shadows. Blue lightning flashed, and before anyone could even react, this thunderous power clashed against Arthur's fiery slash of justice. The two met, creating a momentous backlash that caused the very ground itself to tremble. What's strange was that the slashes were not made out of magnetic power. It was just a normal innate sword skill, a pure clash of swords. All of this happened within a very small instant. Thanks to Jaku's timely counter, the shadow orcs were now halfway through their teleportation. But almost in the next instant, Arthur disappeared from sight. He reappeared right in front of a shadow orc, his sword just a few inches away from the orc's neck. Suddenly, a piece of shadow crawled from the orc's feet up to his neck like a scarf, coalescing and turning solid just a moment before the sword decapitated him. As Arthur attempted to cut the orc's head, the shadow scarf fought against the knight's blade, creating sparks of light and dark. But against a true swordsman, the scarf couldn't hold too long. The scarf exploded like a balloon, allowing the sword to finally cut through to the orc's tough skin. The orc's head flew in the air, but an instant later, it turned into a shadow. Jaku's delaying counter and the brief instant of shadow defense allowed the orcs to finally complete their transportation spell. They descended into the depths of the shadow, completely disappearing from sight. Annoying, Arthur said. Then he quickly turned to Jaku. You're going to have to tell me where they disappeared off to. Jaku shrugged. Nah, don't think so. Then, Jaku's entire body turned into blue lightning and completely disappeared from sight, leaving Arthur alone in the dungeons. Arthur sheathed his sword, and a few seconds later, hundreds of footfalls echoed through the stone halls. Hundreds of knights and soldiers all rushed through the narrow openings of the dungeon, their weapons drawn, as they searched for the cause of such a disturbance. But when they arrived, they saw only Arthur standing in a rubble of stone blocks, a contemplative sense of aura radiating around him. Only one of the rooms in the prisons were destroyed. It looked like a storm had passed through only this specific room. What happened? Asked one of the knights. Arthur turned to him and replied, Injustice. This incident sparked a fire of controversy within the knightly court. First of all, the intruders. Many were even doubting that they even existed in the first place. After all, this was their territory. There was nothing but knights and guards in a kilometer-wide radius around the court. They had defenses in place for this specific type of problem, especially in the dungeons. No one comes in or not without them knowing about it. But according to Arthur and the guard's report, it seemed that the intruders, plural, had snuck inside the dungeon and retrieved their prisoners without so much as alerting their warning bells. Of course, if this was really true, then this meant that their security wasn't as good as they thought. And of course, with a knight's pride, many simply couldn't accept that. The fact that Arthur, the one said to be the most talented swordsman among the youths, wasn't even able to stop any one of the intruders made this story less likely to believe. Some even thought that this was nothing more than a ploy to help their case during the exhibition. If Arthur lost one of his prisoners during this would surely lower his chances to be picked by swordmistress Eldia. But of course, once the knights investigated the scene, they were able to verify the claims. Which begged the question, who were these intruders? There were not a lot of people or organizations who had the power and capacity to infiltrate a knightly court. Perhaps only the high-ranked upper echelons and the conglomerates would even have the guts to do such a thing, much less the power to actually do it. This must be the work of the black market. No, it must be one of the upper echelons. Could it be one of the thieving guilds? Chapter 1118 Getaway Myth. Chapter 1118 Getaway Myth. Of course, no one thought of the Reborn company as the one responsible for this incident. They threw out name after name, but they simply couldn't conclude on a single organization. After all, there wasn't really any solid evidence on the scene aside from the lost prisoners. The cuts on the ground, walls, and ceiling were from Arthur's attempt at apprehending the criminals. And since the ones that were lost were barely even criminals, the knights didn't think much of it anymore. If this was any other time, the breach in security would have been enough for them to be fully focused on finding the intruders. But in this current moment, there were far more important things for them to think of. The friendly exhibition match. It would take place tomorrow, coinciding on the 6th day of the feast. So today, the knights and their subsequent supporters were very busy in preparing for the day that would change their whole lives. They would worry about this once they became the heavenly swordmistress only student. At that point, they would have all the influence and power to chase after those intruders. "Sir Arthur," said one of the butlers, "you are needed at the practice range. All the other knights have gathered before you." Right now, his competitors were busy showing off their skills to the general public, gathering fame from the normal people and getting sponsors from the companies. Just like in any other competition, advertising was very much famous amongst the companies. They sponsor the greatest athletes and competitors so that they could bring the name of their companies to the top once they won. And right now, since the feast was still ongoing, many of the upper echelons and the conglomerates were asking the knights to start publicly eating their food. Once the knights ate their food, then the general public would get swayed by their opinions. This had been proven very effective by the Reborn company, as their restaurant's fame got boosted by the Mystic Master Rivet publicly eating it while she was on her lecture. Arthur got sponsored as well. The conglomerates were very much willing to pay him a substantial amount of sand dollars as long as he ate their food during their practice sessions. He was, after all, the one most likely to become Eldia's student. This also meant that he was very likely to become the next heavenly knight in the future. And if the next heavenly knight publicly expressed his approval of a food, then it was a guaranteed hit amongst the people. "The Hephaestus conglomerate wishes for you to wear their new line of armor sets today and tomorrow as well," said the butler. "They are confident that it will be a 10% boost in defense against earth attacks." Arthur stayed silent, still in a contemplative mood. "Sir Arthur, are you listening? This is important. You'll be needing that extra 10% if you want to fight against Morgan in the exhibition tournament. He's the only one who poses a threat to you." It was at that moment that Arthur raised his head. "Not just him," he said. "What do you mean?" "The intruder," Arthur replied. The butler shook his head. "Sir Arthur, it is very likely that this intruder has been planning this for a very long time. They are also specializing in infiltration. This does not mean that they could defeat you." But Arthur knew differently. Even now, he still couldn't get that demi-human out of his head. That lazy posture. He had never fought against someone like that before. And what was strange was that even with that single clash of theirs, he didn't know who would win. Usually, against other knights, a single clash of swords was enough for him to know if he could defeat them or not. He had never been wrong. But against that demi-human, he didn't know. Not only was he unorthodox in his movements, but the scaled demi-human was filled with a lot of mysteries and paradoxes that he just couldn't figure out. Yes, Arthur didn't use his ability power. If he did, then he was sure that he'd be able to easily defeat the demi-human without problem. But that wasn't what he was concerned about. It was about their sword skill. In a battle with nothing but their swords and their wits, he wanted to know who would win. This was enough for him to widen his perspectives. He still had things to improve. Just then, the butler finally handed him a piece of paper. "Sir Arthur, this is the list of competitors on the day of the exhibition," said the butler. "We have compiled all of their strengths and weaknesses for you to strategize over. Of course, it would be better if you see it for yourself during the practice matches today, but I guess you have no need for that. Arthur wanted to get out of the dungeon right now, but his eyes flashed over the piece of paper, and he couldn't help but notice one thing. What is this? On the bracket for the exhibition match, there was one block which didn't have a single name at all. It was just a question mark. Who is supposed to fight here? The butler nodded. Yes, that is weird. But that is what the heavenly sword mistress instructed us to do. She did. Yes, every single one of the competitors are from famous families and knights that are proficient in the sword. Except for one. It seems to be a demi-human coming from the Reborn company. Arthur froze. What? Yes, it seems that this demi-human was able to win a competition made by the werewolves and has proven himself, said the butler. Tell me more, Arthur said, his eyes in complete focus. The butler felt awkward seeing Arthur's serious gaze and coughed. Ahem. There is not much known, Sir Arthur. Well, not exactly. But the things that are known about him are simply things of myth. It's just rumors. Chapter 1119 added to the list. Chapter 1119 added to the list. Arthur perked up once he heard that. Tell me, he demanded. The butler coughed, feeling awkward as he had to say the rumors out loud. They were so fantastical and out-of-world that it was quite embarrassing to say out loud. Well, for one, he defeated Mauricio Aubert. This garnered a subtle reaction from Arthur. There were only a few people in this world who people compared him to in terms of swordsman skill. And Mauricio was one of them. In fact, Arthur was preparing himself to face Aubert in the exhibition round. But weirdly, he noticed that Aubert's name was not in the names among the competitors. We don't know if it's true or not, said the butler. There are a lot of conflicting events. The official reports from the Aubert company was that Mauricio retired from that competition of his own accord. Meanwhile, some eyewitnesses suggest that the demi-human defeated him quite handily, to the point where Mauricio experienced such an embarrassment that he completely refused to use a sword ever again. That was quite a leap. Defeating a swordsman so handily that he ended up losing his motivation to become a swordsman was very hard to believe. He could see why many people didn't believe the rumors. And during that competition, it is said that the demi-human awakened some sort of fantastical power that shook the very ground itself. I mean, can you believe it? I think it's just a hallucination from the spectators. Really, a misrepresentation of magic. The butler was clearly unbelieving of the rumors. But if Arthur's guess was correct, then that same demi-human was the one who he fought against in the dungeons. There was not a lot of demi-humans who could match him for turn of sword, after all. It was also rumored that the demi-human awakened a magnetic power during that fight. And that one was proven to be correct, the butler said begrudgingly. Arthur turned to him. If that one was true, then what makes you so sure that the other rumors aren't? And with that, the butler had nothing to say. One thing's for sure. I'll be having fun in the exhibition match. During that tournament, he'd be able to show off his true powers. His sword heart and his ability power would be at full display. How was the retrieval? Michael asked Jaku. Meh, it was okay, Jaku replied. For some reason, Michael found that hard to believe. They did just infiltrate a knightly court. A heavenly knight was residing there for God's sake. At the very least, they would be having some run-ins with some guards. Well, I did fight with a knight. And it was okay, Jaku replied with his signature nonchalance. We would have been out of there faster if I used my ability power, but I was too lazy. Michael shook his head at Jaku's lackadaisical attitude. But perhaps it did save them this time. If Jaku used his ability power and inadvertently used his ancient roar, then the whole knightly court would have been alerted of his presence. Heck, everyone in New Sparta would have sensed his powers. At that point, they'd be lucky if they didn't get hunted down by the heavenly sword mistress. What would she have thought if they found out they were infiltrating their base? Anyway, all's well that ends well. Now, they had to worry about the McTony's restaurant. The 5th day had been going very smoothly. It wasn't bad, but it also wasn't the best. They were just in the same place as they were yesterday, which meant that they probably wouldn't jump up in rankings at the end of the day. It was all because of the fanfare with the upcoming swordsman exhibition tournament. This was literally a once-in-a-lifetime event where they would finally see the heavenly sword maiden accept her one and only student. This placed a heavy emphasis on the knights and the swordsmen. They became the center of attention. Anything they did, the public did the same. About 2 hours before lunchtime, the entire feast lost about half of their customers to the knightly court. That was where the knights and the swordsmen practiced for the competition tomorrow. Cheers erupted as the favorites finally revealed themselves. Famous names like Sir Brutus from the Lionhearts, Sir Alexis from the Carpenters, Mistress Gala of the Arids, and many more. They all wore flashy armor sets and dazzling weapons. These were items that exuded strength, might, and courage, characteristics that a knight should have. Of course, these were all sponsored by upper echelon companies and conglomerates alike. They were especially made for them by the blacksmiths of that company, allowing their respective emblems to be front and center for the public to see. Sales of armors and weapons skyrocketed like crazy. Of course, the general public could never afford to buy the armors of those knights. Not only were they made out of expensive and exotic materials, they were also handmade by the very best of blacksmiths. They were not meant to be mass-marketed. The upper echelons and the conglomerates bypassed this problem by simply imitating their own work, but with lesser quality materials. They functionally looked the same, and the run-of-the-mill adventurer would never know the difference. And it wasn't even the effect of the armor that they wanted to buy. They just wanted the experience of buying the item that their favorite swordsman wore during the exhibition. So, the more popular the swordsman, the more popular their armors and weapons. This meant more sponsors. This means that we have no one to sponsor, Michael realized. If all the knights and strong swordsmen from famous families were rich and famous, they would never choose an unknown company like theirs. Thankfully, they did have Jaku. Shiina. Do you think Jaku would enter the exhibition tournament? The white-scaled dragonborn nodded. It's not a matter of his opinion, Lord Michael. If you say he should, then he will. Shiina emanated a dark aura when she said that, which made even Michael shiver. How do we register? That's the thing, Lord Michael. He already is. What? Wasn't it weird when they hadn't even started considering whether they should enter the exhibition tournament? They were already included? Jaka's name was even on the list. Shiina gave him the supposed lineup for the tournament shown on the blackboards of the knightly court. And there, amongst the names of famous human swordsmen, were Jaka's name written in italics. This was because under his name was the title of demi-human. In fact, Shiina and the others didn't even know about this until the Shadow Orcs heard rumors and discussions about the Reborn company. After all, the would-be names of the candidates of the Heavenly Swordmistress only student was a very short and famous list. They either came from the Order of the Heavenly Knights themselves, or they were part of a famous line of swordsman families. Ironically, Jaka's name was the only one that stood out the most. No one knew who he was, so there became a lot of speculation as to who he truly was to deserve such a spot. Who even knew Jaku was a swordsman? Only the werewolves were first-hand witnesses of Jaku's awakening during the tournament. And they certainly weren't the ones who put Jaku's name on the list. Chief Lupin would have told him. Not only that, the werewolves simply didn't have that much influence on the order that they were able to squeeze a demi-human's name into the mix. Then who? Just then, Michael heard a knock on the door of their headquarters. Who is it? Shiina opened the door, only to see a woman with a blindfold enter their room. A few hours before this, the nightly court was disturbed by the infiltration of shadowy figures. It quickly died down because of the looming exhibition match tomorrow. But of course, nothing could escape the ears of the Heavenly Sword Maiden. Sword Mistress, the people are asking, who is this demi-human you let into the exhibition match? It's getting hard to come up with an excuse. After all, what would people think if they knew that you were the one to put his name into the tournament? Eldia stayed silent. She still vividly remembered that night. That night when the ancient roar awakened in New Sparta and caused a tremendous wave of shock and excitement everywhere. Many forgot, thinking that it was just a simple earthquake. But she knew the truth. And throughout all this time, she'd been secretly investigating the cause of such an incident. She thought it would have taken more time. But after learning that the Reborn company figured out the secret to demi-human magnetism, she finally understood the truth. That white-scaled demi-human bore a striking resemblance to the one she saw before. It wasn't that hard to guess they were related of some sort. That's why she immediately took a chance and added him in. The knights had been far too complacent these days. Chapter 1120 Accessibility. Chapter 1120 Accessibility. Swordmistress, there are a lot of things that you need to settle before the tournament tomorrow, said Eldia's butler. Exhibition match, not tournament. Ahem, that's what I said. But anyway, it's already widely accepted that this will become the defining moment in which you choose your successor. But the Heavenly Swordmistress shook her head. It is not me who chooses, but the sword. Right? Well, there are a lot of people who are requesting your presence at the moment. We have the leaders of upper echelons and conglomerates wanting to discuss sponsorship within the whole tournament as a whole. Eldia shook her head once again. I will be busy for the time being. Her butler looked frantically at the schedule paper in his hands. Had he completely forgotten about something? But no. When he checked again, he did see that this was supposed to be the time where she would be in negotiations with the Hephaestus conglomerates about armors and weapons. I won't be going to that meeting, Eldia said nonchalantly. Swordmistress, this is a conglomerate we're talking about. We can't just simply reject their proposal without a good reason. The Heavenly Swordmistress nodded. I do have a good reason. I don't want to do it. Her butler was going to say something to refute her, but she continued. Does a single company have that much influence on a heavenly knight that my time is subject to their approval? Is the order that weak? She asked. After that, the butler had no other words to say. She was a heavenly knight. Perhaps the one with the most influence, since the sword was considered to be the most popular weapon in the world. It would reflect poorly on the order and the heavenly knight status if they had to bow down to a single company, even if they were a conglomerate. All right, sword mistress. What will you be doing in the time being? Maybe I can help assist you, the butler asked. Eldia stood up from her desk and then took out a single paper from the stack. She then gave it to the butler for him to peruse. If you can help me navigate to this place, then I would be grateful. The butler looked at the paper in his hands, and he couldn't help but gasp out loud in shock. This is a poster for McTony's restaurant. Eldia smiled. Yes, that is exactly what I am talking about. I wish to talk to their owner. The butler was at a loss for words. In such an important time, she wanted to visit a restaurant? Didn't she see the problem with that? Sword mistress, why didn't you simply visit their restaurant yourself? Surely they would do everything in their power to accommodate a person such as you. But Eldia quickly shook her head at that thought. I simply can't. That would be rude. Don't you know that they are currently in a very busy state during the feast? There's only 2 days left before the end, you know. If I went in there, their process would surely get disrupted. Their customers would stop what they are doing and completely put their attention on me. I've already inconvenienced them enough with the exhibition match. So, I can't make it harder on them for a simple request of mine. The butler couldn't believe it. The heavenly sword mistress was willing to miss an appointment with the Hephaestus company, a conglomerate, but she wasn't willing to inconvenience a simple company like Reborn? That didn't make sense. Michael was at a loss for words when he saw Eldia, the heavenly sword mistress, sitting in front of his office drinking tea with the most casualist of attitudes. Ah! Oh, forgive my manners, Eldia said. My name is Eldia. No, that wasn't the problem. Respectfully, I know who you are. I am simply wondering why an esteemed person such as you has elected to visit a small company such as mine. The butler standing beside the sitting sword mistress also looked down at Eldia, curious as to what her answer would be. I am simply a fan of your work, she revealed. My work? He asked. Your work, she said, taking out something from her pockets. It was none other than a phone. The same one that he'd been selling to close friends and acquaintances. The one with the infinite battery source. How did you get that? Eldia deftly navigated through the phone's settings before she eventually found the one she wanted to click. Then the phone rang. A couple of seconds later, someone picked up. Eldia? Asked the person on the other side of the call. Michael found that voice familiar. The sword mistress whispered a few things on the call, before eventually handing the phone to Michael. Hello, Michael? Duchess. I see you've met 2 of my best friends. Do take care of them, okay? They're quite eccentric, but they're good people. Oh, and I gave them the phones. Bye-bye. Michael was left flabbergasted as the Duchess closed the call. He couldn't believe it. The Duchess was actually close friends with a mystic master and a heavenly knight. Their whole friendship was a trifecta of powerful and influential people who could change the world with a single command. I would just like to say that this phone is very useful. Even if I could only use a quarter of the features on it, the phone still gives me a lot of comforts that I didn't have before. Michael only now realized. She was blind. How was she even navigating herself through the flat, 2D screen? Oh, Regina and Rivet helped me memorize the buttons and what it does, Eldia answered. Michael felt truly ashamed. Here he was thinking about apps and features that would make the phone better. But he completely neglected about the fact to make it more accessible to people who didn't have complete use of their body. It was such a simple change that he took a moment to himself and asked ChatJK6 to start the update. A couple of seconds later, the phone in the heavenly swordmistress' hands chimed. And when she clicked the button for opening the phone, it suddenly made a new sound. Opening phone. Surprised, Eldia scrolled through the options. Camera. Reborn delivery. Messages. She clicked on the messages. Message from Regina. Let's talk on the phone later. Sent at 8:53 p.m. The butler looked at the heavenly sword mistress and audibly gasped. He had been her butler for nearing a century, but this was the first time he'd seen her give out such an emotional response. This is a revelation. Thank you, Michael. Michael begrudgingly accepted her thanks, even though he didn't deserve it. He couldn't believe that she'd been putting up with the non-accessible version of the phone for so long. No need to thank me. Anyway, sword mistress, can I help you with anything else? Eldia put her phone down before clearing her throat. I presume that you've already seen the name of your ally in my exhibition tournament. Michael nodded, before hurriedly voicing out his words once he remembered that she couldn't see him. Yes, I did. Did you do that, sword mistress? She nodded. Yes, I did. I confess that I have seen your ally's talent in the sword long before this. I happened upon him when the werewolves had their swordsman tournament. That made sense to Michael. The first time he saw her was on the werewolf territory as well. I put his name there because I believe that he will make for a great competitor. My knights have been complacent recently, and a good change in pace would surely wake them up good. Michael beamed with pride as he heard that. I'm grateful, he said. Me as well. Michael found the heavenly swordmistress to be a great guest. She was very amicable and friendly. Not what he would expect for a swordsman of her caliber. And it seemed she thought the same. Oh, you can go now. I'll be having a great talk with this young man from here on out, Eldia said to her butler. But of course, the butler immediately rejected it. Sword mistress, that is not possible. We have just had one of our greatest infiltrations in our knightly court history. We can't just have you in an unfamiliar territory without any guards. Michael scratched his hair. Oh, that was us. Ha! The butler screamed out. He began reaching for the sword on his waist. Eldia raised her hand, still keeping a friendly smile towards Michael. If that was you, then this meant that we had nothing to worry about in the first place, she said. The butler was aghast. Why was the sword mistress so trusting of this kid when he just admitted to committing a crime? Oh, come on, relax, she said to the butler. If they truly wanted to do harm to our knightly court, then we would have lost more than the dungeon. That made the butler even more shocked. Chapter 11:21 Taste of McTony's. Chapter 11:21 Taste of McTony's. Eldia already had a feeling that it was the Reborn company who was responsible for the infiltration. After all, the ones responsible were none other than people of the demi-human denomination. And as much as she didn't want to discriminate, demi-humans simply didn't have that much power compared to humans or beast folks. Except, of course, the demi-humans from the Reborn company. They were on a whole other level, evidenced by that white-scaled demi-human that beat everybody with her skill in the bow. And the heavenly swordmistress guessed that something similar will also happen with the blue-scaled one with the sword. That's the reason why she wanted to visit the Reborn company in the first place. It was because she valued them greatly. Unlike those conglomerates and the upper echelons who had been fed with misinformation, Eldia knew about things firsthand from Duchess Regina. The monarch of Metropolis was more than happy to brag about Michael to their little group of friends. I would also like to try that famous fried chicken of yours, Eldia said to Michael. I know Rivet personally, and that girl's taste has always been hard to satiate. The fact that you were able to make her eat that much food in one sitting is very much impressive. Michael had no problem doing that. And before he could even order it out, Shiina had already brought out a large tray containing all of McTony's offerings. She brought enough for multiple people. This is for you, heavenly sword mistress, said Shiina. I recommend our signature fried chicken paired with our new ice cream. Then she turned to the butler, who seemed disinterested in whatever was being presented to him. This meal is for you, and the rest are for the ones behind you. The butler's eyes widened as he realized that Shiina saw through their stealth. Of course, the butler had asked a few knights to stand guard inside the room, completely making sure that they were undetected from everybody. These knights were in the 9th stage of the body formation realm, just a half step from the nascent spirit. And yet, she could see through them. It seemed that he really was underestimating these groups of demi-humans. I told you they'd know. Anyway, just sit down and take what you've been offered. I don't want you to be rude. The butler had no choice but to oblige. But he stubbornly kept to his feet. Very well, he said before cutting a small piece of chicken from Eldia's plate and eating it immediately. He wanted to check for any poisons. But instead of that, what he found was a completely new sensation. His tongue felt the heat. Oh, if you're acting like that, then it must be good, Eldia said, finally taking a bite for herself. She gasped with a look of mirth on her face. Haha, it's so good. Both of them began eating the chicken on their plates. And prompted by their insatiable curiosity, the other stealth knights finally showed themselves and began eating on their own plates as well. And it became apparent to all of them as to why Rivet had taken a liking to the food. It was a new sensation that could affect even those with a high cultivation like theirs. No food was like this except for the ones produced by the conglomerates and the upper echelons. But those were very rare and expensive to produce. In contrast, this fried chicken did it better while also being cheap and easy to produce. It was a perfect recipe for success. Slurp. The butler broke through the silence as he began sipping the RD soda. And despite being embarrassed, he couldn't help but keep on drinking this fizzy drink. Burp. Would it be possible for another one? He asked. Shiina smiled before giving him another cup, which the butler graciously accepted. Eldia wanted to eat more of the fried chicken, but she couldn't help but put her focus on one of the products on her plate. It was a swirly ice cream on a cone. This looks different from the one Rivet ordered, Eldia commented. Michael nodded. Yeah, she ordered a plain vanilla ice cream cone. The one I gave you is a new variant called the chocolate ice cream. Curious, the heavenly sword mistress took a small sample. And as soon as she did, her eyes widened in complete shock. Suddenly, Michael flinched and activated his absolute unity defense. He felt like there was an edge of a blade pressing right onto his neck, just a few inches away from killing him. But when he looked down to his neck, there was nothing there. My deepest apologies, the heavenly sword mistress said, bowing in a 90-degree arc to Michael. I didn't mean to unleash my sword intent like that. Michael massaged his neck. That feeling felt so real and visceral. Even ChatJK6 was fooled since she activated the absolute unity defense at the moment it happened. And it seemed that they weren't the only ones. The butler and the rest of the knights fell to the floor and was now prostrating to Eldia. It was at this point that Michael truly realized who was in front of him. She was a heavenly knight. Just a single look from her would have been enough to injure him. Maybe fatally. This made him realize that she was far beyond the nascent spirit realm in her current power. This is unbecoming of me, Eldia said, shaking her head. Unprofessional. Michael cleared his throat. It's fine. But what was that? That was my sword intent. It's a technique that turns my thoughts as dangerous as a real weapon. Unleashing this technique is usually only reserved for when I'm fighting someone, or when I'm truly surprised. Then, she raised the chocolate ice cream in front of her. This ice cream, it increased my ability power. Chapter 11:22 Chocolate Ice Cream. Chapter 11:22 Chocolate Ice Cream. At the moment when the heavenly sword mistress took a bite of the chocolate ice cream, she felt something she hadn't ever felt in a long time. She felt her ability power increase. It was just a small fraction, a very tiny amount compared to her already gargantuan amount of ability power. But it still increased it nonetheless. Ever since she reached the peak of her cultivation, she had found it near impossible to actually increase her ability power. None of the famed cultivation pills and herbs that the conglomerates and the upper echelons have advertised to her ever worked. And after a long time of trying, she basically accepted the fact that she would never feel that way again. Except for today. With just a single taste of this chocolate ice cream, Eldia felt a surge of power course through her veins. She felt the world around her become ever so clearer than before. That was why she accidentally unleashed her sword intent. It was a manifestation of that excess ability power that she gathered from eating the ice cream. Try this, the heavenly sword mistress said to her butler. The man got out of his prostration posture and did as he was told. And immediately, a shockwave of power emanated out of the man, manifesting as wind that almost knocked out the chairs in the room. No way, the butler exclaimed. As someone who was still in the middle of his cultivation journey, the butler had a lot more capacity for improvement. This meant that the chocolate ice cream delivered that much more of an impact on his body. The butler quickly closed his eyes and savored the feeling of ability power coursing through his veins. What's weird was that he wasn't getting those threads of ability power from the outside world. He also wasn't generating it from out of nowhere. It was as if the veins that delivered those ability power got sharpened, allowing for a much more impactful and more powerful use of magnetic power. The ice cream made their use of ability power incredibly efficient. It was a qualitative leap, in short. The butler wanted to study this feeling, but after a while, the effects of the chocolate ice cream began waning. Once he opened his eyes, he realized that the heavenly sword mistress and everyone else was looking at him with expectant eyes. Sword mistress, your intuition was correct. This chocolate ice cream has magnifying effects to our ability power. After hearing that, the other knights immediately ate the ice cream on their plates. And just like him, their bodies emanated a shockwave of power that signified their increase in ability threads. It wasn't long before they finished their cone and looked at Michael with expectations for more. They looked like puppies waiting to be fed. I think what my knights are trying to say is that they would be very thankful if you were to give them more of that chocolate ice cream, Eldia said with mirth. Shiina obliged and each gave them a whole pint of ice cream. Michael, that product of yours is transcendent. It's not an exaggeration to say that it will change the way wars are fought. How did you create such a thing? If Michael was going to be honest, he had no idea. After all, he didn't even know that eating chocolate ice cream improved ability power. Was it because of the chocolate? The cacao beans that the chocolate was made out of were special. It wasn't like the cacao beans from Earth. Cacao was bred by the orcs, which gave those who consumed it a tremendous boost in magical power. But as far as he knew, it was only limited to mana, not ability power. He tested it himself. That's why chocolate hadn't been used by the Rebornians in a long time. They'd simply grown out of it once they became magnetics. I'll try it out. He tasted the chocolate ice cream Shiina gave him, and immediately, he heard a notification bell ringing out in his mind. Chocolate consumed. Ability power increased by 5% for 30 minutes. Michael couldn't believe his eyes. It actually worked. His ability power increased by a fraction. Even if it was only 5%, the fact that he could get that boost just from eating chocolate ice cream meant that it was very well worth it. He didn't even know how this was possible. The chocolate ice cream he ate back then didn't have this kind of effect. What changed? After a few seconds of thinking about it, he had a guess as to who or what was responsible. He whispered to Shiina, and less than a minute later, she led a young man wearing a chef's attire into the room. "This is Remy," he said, introducing him to the heavenly sword mistress. "And I think he's the one who made this all possible." The young man was flustered after seeing the attention placed onto him. "Bro, Michael, what did I do?" Michael patted him on the back. "You're not in trouble. In fact, it's the opposite. You did something to the chocolate, didn't you?" Remy put his head down. "Yes, but I just wanted to try out a new recipe for creating chocolate from scratch." Michael nodded with satisfaction. It made sense. Just like with the new McTony's fried chicken, the recipe got imbued with ability power as soon as the magnetic Remy got his hands on it. The chocolate was the same. Before, it only affected mana. But since Remy created a new recipe, he must have inadvertently created a new recipe that also affected ability power thanks to his magnetism. It was at this point that Michael was truly starting to appreciate their new up-and-coming chef. "Young man, if you can continue to work on that chocolate, then I think that you have a bright future ahead of you," said Eldia. Those who knew her would know that that wasn't a light compliment. She truly believed that Remy's future was comparable even to that of the upper echelons and conglomerates. Chapter 11 23 Nights Craving. Chapter 11 23 Nights Craving. Remy became shy at the heavenly swordmistress' praise. After all, what he did was a simple experiment that he didn't think would see the light of day. He was so embarrassed about trying to create a new recipe that wasn't chicken, that he almost abandoned the project. But he stood with it. "Heavenly swordmistress," said the butler, "if we were to have this chocolate ice cream in our nightly court." He didn't have to finish his words for Eldia to understand what he was trying to say. If they had this chocolate ice cream to enhance their knight's training and output, then they'd be able to further assert their dominance as the best organization out of them all. Finally, the butler turned to Michael, his eyes now reflecting that of respect and admiration. "Lord Michael," he said, "would it be possible for us to buy this chocolate ice cream en masse? Our nightly court will be more than pleased to strike a contract with your company for a recurring order." Michael wanted to say yes immediately. After all, this was an opportunity that wouldn't come every day. However, he still didn't know the capacity for their production. He barely even knew how Remy created this ice cream. "If you want to strike a deal with the Reborn company, then I suggest you talk with our CEO, advised Shiina. "She will be more than happy to accommodate your needs." Michael also thought that this was a good opportunity to start spreading the knowledge about phones. "If you want to purchase chocolate ice cream, then I suggest you do so through the phone," he said. "Swordmistress, you can order it through the Reborn delivery app." Eldia navigated her phone until the text-to-speech AI spoke of the Reborn delivery app. Michael gave them a brief overview on the capabilities of the phone, and immediately, the butler was more than excited to try it out. "We can order McTony's from this phone from anywhere we want?" Eldia asked, amused. "That must be what I've been hearing about all this time. Chocolate ice cream," the butler muttered to himself as he saw the picture of that unique swirly shape with chocolate still dripping to its side. He was starting to miss that feeling. Even though it had only been a few minutes after that euphoric moment when his ability power increased by a slight amount, he already wanted more. It was kind of addicting. He became so excited that he couldn't help but snatch the phone away from the heavenly swordmistress. "That is rude," she said, chastising him. "My deep apologies, heavenly swordmistress. I simply could not help but get excited. We must buy every kilogram of chocolate ice cream for ourselves. We don't want the others to get ahead of us. Don't you know that McTony's restaurant is very in demand right now?" Eldia shook her head. Just half an hour ago, her butler was complaining to her about how the Reborn company wasn't worth her time. But now, he just couldn't stop himself from praising them. "You know, if you want, I can give each of you your own phones," Michael said. The butler and the knights salivating behind him all perked up once Michael said that. "Would that be possible?" Eldia asked. "Of course. Mystic Master Rivet also bought her own batch of phones. I can only give you 3,000 units for now, would that be okay?" "Yes, we will be greatly thankful for that," she replied. Michael produced the phones he manufactured himself from his shadow inventory. Then, he gave it to the butler, who seemed more than excited with getting an object that would get him chocolate ice cream with just one click. There were more features with the phone, but he didn't seem to care about that. "Ahem, don't forget the payment to them," said Eldia to the butler. Quickly, the butler used his pocket dimension ring to give Shiina a wooden chest containing 30 million sand dollars. "Thanks," Michael said. "No thank you," said the heavenly knight. Now we must depart since we have a lot of things to prepare for during the exhibition match. We will be waiting patiently for your demi-human to perform well." After that, Eldia, the butler, and the rest of the knights departed from the Reborn headquarters with excited looks on their faces. The butler especially was elated. "Sword mistress, shall I start distributing the phones to our knights? Give our most trusted allies their own phones and teach them how to use it. As for the rest, keep it stored in our treasure vault." This confused the butler. "Why? We will be using them as a reward. I have a feeling that these phones are going to be widely sought after in the future. This will give them extra motivation to perform better." After the heavenly swordmistress left their headquarters, Michael sat back in his chair and couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu. Why was it that he was being visited by extremely powerful and influential old women day by day? He didn't mind though. They ended up benefiting greatly from it, after all. If all went well, then it wouldn't be long before the knights began showing up using their phones just like Rivet and her students. And with both the wizards and the knights being seen using the phone, it was very likely that the public would get curious and want a phone for themselves. But that was for the future. Now they had to worry about the feast. With the exhibition taking up everyone's attention, McTony's restaurant had no opportunity to increase their publicity. But thankfully, the solution to their problem had finally revealed itself. It was none other than the chocolate ice cream that the knights couldn't get enough of. If everyone knew that the chocolate ice cream increased ability power within those who consumed it, then Michael had no doubt that people would quickly want to buy it themselves. Chapter 11:24 Sponsoring for McTony's. Chapter 11:24 Sponsoring for McTony's. It was the perfect way to advertise McTony's restaurant. An item that would magically increase one's ability power would be very much sought after. In fact, according to the heavenly swordmistress, there were consumables with the exact same effect. The conglomerates and upper echelons had access to cultivation pills and herbs that would increase one's ability power. However, those were extremely rare and only accessible to the elite of the elites. They were probably even more expensive than getting a kilogram of Godforge piece. And the fact that these consumables only had a temporary effect made it very much unsustainable to use. That was why Michael hadn't seen anyone use any kind of pills before, simply because no one could afford it. But the chocolate ice cream was the exact opposite of that. It was so affordable that even a beggar would be able to eat at least a single serving of it in a week. Not only was it cheap, but its effect wasn't even lower than those elite pills that the conglomerates and the upper echelons hoarded for themselves. So, if the effects of the chocolate ice cream were to be widely spread, then McTony's restaurant would surely become even more popular than it was now. In fact, it may be even the very thing that would allow them to finally push themselves through the top rankings of the feast. But of course, they first had to put the chocolate ice cream into the public sphere. The best way to show the effects of their miraculous product was to show its results. If they sponsored a contestant to eat chocolate ice cream and they began performing well during the tournament, then they'd be able to prove their claim that it indeed increased ability power. But the problem now was that they had no knight to sponsor. Almost all of them were already sponsored by the conglomerates and the upper echelons even before the tournament was announced. Those ultra-talented knights were already sponsored simply because of their potential. And even if they did find a knight, they had to convince them to take payment in the form of ice cream, which without context would be a very easy no from the knights. They couldn't even use Jakku for this. Even though Jakku would be participating in the tournament tomorrow, he wouldn't be the best person to show the effects of the ice cream. That lazy dragonborn was already powerful without it. He didn't need the ice cream to take the top spot if he stopped being lazy about it. So if they used the chocolate ice cream on Jakku, it would send the wrong signal to the general public. What they needed was a swordsman who was infamous for his, for lack of a better term, bad skill. Then once he ate chocolate ice cream, he would suddenly explode in power and allow him to defeat opponents he couldn't before. Once Michael told Shiina of this plan, she immediately nodded. "Very well, Lord Michael. I shall have the Shadow Orc spy on the current line-up of competitors in the exhibition match tomorrow." And before Michael could even form his next sentence, Shiina already had a new paper right in front of her hands, delivered by a Shadow Orc that emerged from out of nowhere. "Ah, here it is, Lord Michael. Chief Narito and Chief Sasuke nominate a knight called Sir Phoenix for us to sponsor. He fits all of our criteria perfectly." Michael was handed a very detailed background check made by the Shadow Orcs. His eyes began to widen as he realized that this background check contained very intimate details about Phoenix, including his daily schedule for going to the latrines. Michael certainly didn't need to know that. So, he skipped to the part that was highlighted by Shiina. And after reading through it, he couldn't help but feel sorry for the knight. It seemed that Phoenix was once a talented knight who was said to have enough potential to go toe-to-toe against Sir Arthur himself. However, an unfortunate accident caused his potential to get cut short. A literal explosive encounter with a group of thieves caused a metal to get lodged inside Phoenix's heart. And in order to save his heart, The best surgeons did what they could to get the shrapnel out of his body. Thankfully, they did, but at the cost of Phoenix's potential. The apothecaries couldn't fix the damage in the knight's heart, causing his ability power to go haywire. It was now widely known that Phoenix's ability power was widely inferior to his peers. Even if he was in the 7th stage of the body formation realm, his ability power was only equivalent to the 4th stage. Even Phoenix's sword skills weren't inferior to the best knights. The fact that his ability power was always lagging 3 stages behind his true cultivation meant that he never had any chance in winning the exhibition match. In fact, the only reason why he was still in the competition was because he was still titled as a knight. But in reality, people were already crossing him off in their minds. He was a free win, basically. Michael felt that Phoenix was the perfect person for them to sponsor. If ability power was his only problem, then their chocolate ice cream would be the perfect solution. Shiina, start contacting Sir Phoenix about this opportunity, he commanded Shiina. Already on it, Lord Michael. The shadow orcs are currently shadowing the knight, trying to find the perfect opportunity to approach. Michael found it weird that they were using the same tactics as assassins, but they were in a hurry. They need to sponsor Phoenix as fast as possible so that they could go right on time for tomorrow's exhibition match. Then he turned to Remy. Remy, can you work on the chocolate ice cream and make it better? The little chef's eyes glistened with excitement. You got it, bro Mike. Chapter 11:25 Pity for Phoenix. Chapter 11:25 Pity for Phoenix. Back in the knightly court, people from all over the globe have gathered to see the knights and swordsmen prepare for the most important day of their entire lives. Tomorrow, the heavenly swordmaster was going to decide which one of them was her protege. Tomorrow, she was going to decide whether they'd made the right decision in choosing the path of the sword. After all, if they weren't chosen to become Eldia's student, then what was it all for? The knightly court was a giant expanse of a plain field, where small circle arenas were placed made out of pure stone. This was where the knights practiced their sword skills in front of hundreds of thousands of spectators. Of course, at the very center of the court was none other than Sir Arthur, the one said to be the leading candidate in obtaining the heavenly swordmistress approval. Next to his arena were a couple of other famous knights, all coming from an established family of swordsmen continuing the legacy that their forefathers created before them. Then, on the outer circle of the court were the lesser-known swordsmen that the order invited from all over the place. They could be vagrants, vagabonds, anyone as long as they had been proven to be good with the sword. These arenas contained straw dummy targets in which the knights and swordsmen could unleash their skills on their target freely. Of course, since the competition was still reserved for tomorrow, each knight and swordsman were only limited to using their physical skills. No use of their sword heart and their sword intents anywhere. This was to ensure that chaos didn't reign during this practice period. Why are they even practicing today? Isn't it a disadvantage for everyone if they show off their skills now? Asked one of the spectators hanging from the roofs of the court. He and thousands more weren't allowed inside due to it being full capacity, so they had to scale up the walls of the court just to take a glimpse of the practice period. You don't know anything about swordsmen, do you? No. There is something that swordsmen have called the sword heart. It is the very source of their power. It's the reason why some of these guys could slice through an entire mountain if they wished to do so. Really? The man was telling the truth. The sword heart was the equivalent of the Godforge piece on a magnetic. They just called it differently. If a swordsman wanted to increase his cultivation by 1 stage and take in Godforge pieces into his heart, then he must first saturate his sword heart like a balloon. Only then will he be able to break through his current limits. This wasn't much different from other magnetics. Except, swordsmen grew their sword heart through very different means. If it could be described in one word, then one would have to be noble, like a knight. It has been said that a sword heart doesn't simply grow through practice, but also through actions. One must act noble and magnanimous befitting that of a knight. Then and only then would their sword heart grow. That was why Arthur and multiple other knights walked through New Sparta looking for injustice to correct. By apprehending criminals and hooligans, their sword heart would grow just in time for the competition tomorrow. It was also noble for knights to show off their practice to the public. This would even the playing field, showing everyone that they weren't hiding anything for tomorrow. It would be a fair fight. That wasn't the only reason why they had to practice publicly. They were also bound by contract with the companies that sponsored them to show off their newly obtained armor and swords. It wasn't noble to renege on a deal. Many people began to notice that there was a single arena in the court that wasn't occupied by anyone. It was only on the outskirts of the area, but it was still a sought-after spot. Many swordsmen who didn't make the cut in the competition would kill to get a spot in the public training area. Yet, this person didn't even show up. Of course, this spot was reserved for none other than the lazy dragonborn, Jakku. By his title alone, one could guess why he didn't enter the practice area. Why would they not participate in the practice? Is this guy sick? They're literally putting themselves in a disadvantage. There are hundreds of thousands of spectators here. This would have allowed his sword heart to grow a lot. Who is Jaku? How come I've never heard of this guy? How did he even get a spot in this competition? Many were wondering about the absent swordsman, including a certain man on the outskirts of the practice area. TSK. Wasting space. It was a red-haired man with a serious look on his face. He was as young as the knights and swordsmen here, but his weathered countenance made him look many years older. Unlike the hopeful knights among him, this man looked jaded. He looked bitter. If one were to look carefully, one would see a small scar peeking out of his armored collar. This scar extended from his clavicle, all the way down to his waist, perfectly bisecting where his heart was located. This scar was the reason why this man looked hopeless. It was the reason why, despite being a knight, he got looks of pity instead of looks of respect from the spectators around him. The man subconsciously scratched his scar, even though he was wearing armor. Still ached, even after all these years. It was a constant reminder of what could have been, of what he could have achieved if not for that accident. His name was Phoenix, and he was a failure of a knight, and this competition was simply a humiliation waiting to happen. He bitterly welcomed it. Tutu. Chapter 1126 Hang the Sword. Chapter 1126 Hang the Sword. Phoenix whipped his head at the sound. What was that weird noise? He asked himself. It sounded like some weird, rhythmic thumping that came from everywhere around him. What's strange was that he seemed to be the only one who was hearing it, or else people would quickly get alarmed at such disturbance. He would have quickly reported it, if not for the fact that he remembered who he was. Right? Nobody cares, he said, laughing at himself. Nobody would care if he reported something weird to the authorities. They would simply write it off as the wild ravings of a cripple. After all, that was what he essentially was. His sword heart was injured to the point where it basically hindered him from doing any basic sword skills that other people would be able to do very easily. If he hadn't been practicing his sword skills every day, he wouldn't have even been able to swing a sword. He looked longingly at the center of the practice area, where Arthur and the other knights were merrily practicing their sword skills. In another life, he would have joined them in that place. He would have exchanged jokes with them. He would have had that friendly banter that only rivals would have. But unfortunately, he didn't live that life. It was taken from him because of an accident. He shook his head. There was no need to reminisce about something that didn't happen. He had long learned to live with his disability, to accept it for all that it was. After all, he was still very lucky that he survived it all. In the worst-case scenario, he wouldn't even have had a heart to practice with. So despite the unfortunate circumstance that he found himself in, Phoenix never felt resentment towards the people that caused his accident nor the people that tried and failed to fully cure him. He just had to accept his current situation and live with it the best way that he could. Of course, there were some times that he couldn't help but feel pity for himself. Especially today, since he was seeing firsthand the life that he could have been living. Hopefully that would change soon. Phoenix unsheathed his sword. His hands were trembling, the heart in his chest beating randomly. A sword heart needed to be calm and tranquil to be able to cut as sharply as possible. His heart couldn't even cut a single blade of grass. He went through his practice swings. It looked clumsy and slow compared to the knights and swordsmen around him. Hey, who is that? Is he really a swordsman? Don't you know him? That's Sir Phoenix. You know, the guy who had that accident. Now I feel bad for making fun of his sword skills. But still, why is he even here? Not to be rude, but if he's injured, then he shouldn't be part of the competition. He should have given his spot to some other swordsman out there. Phoenix stopped swinging his sword. He could hear those sharp words clearly, and it cleaved through his heart like a spike. He, too, didn't know why he was in this competition. Sure, the official answer was that the order had to uphold his title as a knight. But if they truly wanted to get rid of him, they could easily make some excuse that everyone would have accepted. Instead, they still put his name on the ballot. They still had him go through this humiliating process of losing to his peers. I need a break, he said to himself. He sheathed his sword back and walked out of his practice area. The crowd cheered. Surely it was because Sir Arthur performed some amazing sword stunt. But Phoenix couldn't help but feel that those jeers were actually for him. They wanted him out. Phoenix found a dark corner on the knightly court to sit and sulk. Just then, he heard something scuttling in the darkness. Pest! Phoenix flinched, his sword already unsheathed and ready to cut whoever had disturbed his peace. Boing! 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 Suspicion quickly turned to confusion as Phoenix saw a cute, violet slime come out of the darkness. A monster! A slime was still a monster through and through. But even if that were the case, Phoenix couldn't help but let his guard down as he looked at the little violet blob in front of him. This was perhaps the biggest mistake he would ever make. I'm not a monster. I'm Master's pet, Fudge said proudly. Phoenix sheathed his sword. Why are you here? If the other knights found you, they would have cut you down immediately. Fudge tilted his body. Aren't you one too? This caused Phoenix to have a self-deprecating laugh. Not anymore. Seeing this opportunity, Fudge jumped atop Phoenix's head. Why not? Because I'm not strong enough. Fudge smiled. Sinisterly. Would you like to be? I can make that happen. Of course, Phoenix didn't believe the slime one bit. Ha ha ha. I'm not sure that a slime can fix my problem. Not even the great healer Sinclair could heal me. Fudge jumped into the man's arms to look at him directly in the face. My master is better than whoever that Sinclair is, Fudge claimed. He can heal your injury, whatever it is. Phoenix almost laughed. Did the slime know he was talking badly about the woman that a conglomerate was named after? Even if he can, I don't want it. This confused Fudge. What? Why? Because after this competition, I'm letting down my sword. Hard work can't overcome my disability. Phoenix decided that this competition would be the final push he needed to finally quit being a swordsman. If he was humiliated in a fight against the other knights, then this would give him the motivation to finally let go of that hopeless dream of becoming a heavenly knight. So, thank you, little slime. But I've already decided what I'm going to do. Maybe being a farmer will be better for me. As Phoenix began walking back towards the practice area, a dark shadow loomed behind him, a sinister smile forming on the darkness. Chapter 1127 Phoenix's Resolution. Chapter 1127 Phoenix's Resolution. Phoenix found his entire body unable to move. Even when he tried to use his own ability power, there seemed to be a sinister manacle that restrained him from moving anywhere he wanted. He looked down, only to see shadow tendrils now wrapped around his ankles. What's happening? He asked out loud. But it was only now that he realized that the cheers and excited shouts from the crowd had already disappeared. The only thing that was left was his own voice echoing out into the void. Ugh! Phoenix struggled to unsheath his sword. It took him every inch of his willpower to finally take out the blade to try and sever the black tendrils that had taken him for a prisoner. Why are you trying to run away? I thought that you didn't want to do anything anymore. He looked around and searched for that voice. Came from the slime, there was no doubt about it. He should have known. He shouldn't have trusted such a weird creature suddenly appearing out of nowhere. Phoenix raised his sword and swung it at the tendrils at his feet. The bleed passed through it like it was made out of smoke. But despite that, it still grabbed a hold of him and never let go. What do you want? Phoenix screamed aloud. Fudge loomed behind him. You made a mistake. You said that you didn't think my master could cure you. That is disrespect that cannot be passed by. Phoenix frowned. What was the slime talking about? It was angry because he said that his master couldn't do something that nobody could cure? Of course he couldn't. The Order of the Heavenly Knights spared no expense, sought after every healer out there including Sinclair. But it was to no avail. His affliction was permanent. It's not anyone's fault. That was just how it was. We could have done this amicably, now you forced my hand, Fudge said ominously. At this point, Phoenix realized that he was being targeted by a powerful creature. Even if his ability power was debuffed by his injury, his physical body was still in the 7th stage of body formation. Yet even with that, Phoenix couldn't even move his body from the tendrils. This made him realize that this slime was actually far above the 7th stage already. Probably in the peak of the body formation realm. Kill me if that's what you want to do, Phoenix said. The slime laughed. Ha ha ha, no. You are hereby sentenced with. Phoenix gulped. With eating ice cream. Suddenly, a shadow tendril appeared in front of Phoenix, carrying a cone of chocolate-dipped ice cream. Huh? Phoenix didn't know what he was looking at. Was this some kind of torture method that he didn't know about? Is this some kind of poison? What? No. It's our newest product. You should try it out. And while Phoenix was in the middle of trying to figure out if this was the devil trying to trick him into accepting a devious deal, he suddenly saw a blur on the side of his head. A new figure emerged out of the darkness. A womanly figure. To be exact, it was a demi-human with scales familiar to that of a draconian. This woman raised her hand and smacked the slime in the head. Mr. Fudge. Oh, Fudge groaned, a visible lump appearing on his head. Miss Shiina. Shiina then quickly turned to Phoenix and bowed towards him. And in a split second, the shadowy tendrils that kept him fettered suddenly disappeared. I am deeply sorry for the actions of Fudge. He means well, she said. Phoenix massaged his wrists. Who are you people? Shiina beamed with a happy smile. We are from the Reborn company, and we are here to tell you of a wondrous opportunity. We would like to be your sponsor during the exhibition match tomorrow. Phoenix stopped as soon as he heard that. Sponsor? Wait, is that what this whole thing has been about? Fudge slithered atop Phoenix's head and looked down at his head. Yeah, what did you think it was? Phoenix didn't know if he should laugh or be angry at this weird turn of events. Here he thought he was going to die. And why should I accept your sponsor after what happened? I'm not sure I trust people who do this sort of thing. Your company is full of weird people. Shiina looked at the swordsman with an amicable smile. But somehow, Phoenix couldn't help but shiver at the sight. Somehow, this smiling demi-human was more terrifying than the slime monster who took hostage of him. He felt as if he was actually in front of the devil. Thankfully, after a few seconds, Shiina realized what she was doing and finally snapped out of it. Ahem. I will forgive you for that. You do not know what you are talking about. Lord Michael is not a weirdo. You will know that soon enough. Phoenix was still confused as he was before. Anyway, despite Fudge's less than friendly attempt to talk to you, we actually do want to cooperate with you. We believe that we can help you with your current problem. Your sword heart. We can fix it. Phoenix took a step back as he felt an ache from his scar. He subconsciously scratched it, before he shook his head and realized the inevitable. I've heard that before, and they all lead to the same road as before. Nothing can be done. No amount of herbs, medicine, or surgery that you want me to do. Nothing will fix what was already broken. Shiina looked at the man. He did look broken after heartbreak after heartbreak. This is different. Lord Michael is not someone who makes a promise he can't fulfill. Phoenix still looked unconvinced. He turned around. I'm free to go, right? You won't force me? Shiina nodded. Yes, but if you want to believe one more time, then we're here. You only need to take a leap once. Just as Phoenix was about to walk away, he stopped in his tracks. Then he turned around. Heck it. I want to be a swordsman. Chapter 1128 Renewed Night. Chapter 1128 Renewed Night. Despite all the heartbreaks and the false promises, Phoenix just couldn't quiet the beating of his own heart. He wanted to be a swordsman. Even if this new method that they were trying on him wouldn't work, he would still prefer trying it out instead of just assuming it didn't work. At least, he wouldn't have to wonder in the future what could have been. He turned to Shiina and Fudge. What do I have to do? The two Rebornians smiled at each other when they saw this change in Phoenix. This was the kind of indomitable resilience that the Reborn company appreciated. You just need this, Shiina said as she held out the ice cream cone towards Phoenix. The knight looked at the chocolate ice cream with confusion and a little bit of doubt. That is the strangest medicine that I have ever seen, he said. It's not medicine. It's a dessert. Fudge corrected him. This was even weirder. How could a sweet delight ever fix the injury in his heart? But he was not here to doubt them. He was here to know once and for all that there truly was no way to fix his sword heart. He took the ice cream cone, eyes widening as he felt the cold frost emanating out of the swirly cream. He took a bite out of the cone itself with a bit of the chocolate ice cream taken with it. And as soon as the chocolate entered into his system, Phoenix felt an indescribable change in his body. He couldn't quite place what this feeling was. It wasn't until he felt that lightness in his body did he finally realize what was happening. His ability power was circulating in his body for the first time in forever. It had been so long that Phoenix completely forgot the sensation. This lightness that he felt was nothing more than the side effects of his ability power finally manifesting in his body the way that he intended it. His body was getting nourished, getting more powerful as the seconds passed. It didn't take long before his ability power increased to the point where it had finally become equal with his cultivation level. He was now on the same level as the 7th stage knights like Arthur and his other rivals. He was no longer falling behind. This feeling was intoxicating. It was the feeling of belonging. He finally felt like the swordsman that he was supposed to be. It was as if all this time, he'd been living with weights wrapped around his body. But now those weights were gone. He was free. He was better. That moment lasted only a fleeting moment. The effects of the chocolate ice cream was ephemeral. It was impermanent. However, it was enough proof for Phoenix to finally believe what they had been saying all this time. He could be healed. In a few seconds, he devoured the chocolate ice cream. Brain freeze be damned. Phoenix's body emanated a shockwave of power. It wasn't subtle. It reverberated to the outside, to where the other knights were practicing their skills, and where hundreds of thousands of people were watching simultaneously. What was that? Did you feel that? Perhaps the one most intrigued by this change was Sir Arthur himself. He stooped his practice, finally turning his head towards the secluded corner filled with darkness. Then a few seconds later, Phoenix emerged. And immediately, those who were familiar with him knew that something had changed. His shoulders were no longer slumped. His face light, as if he wasn't carrying that burden of sadness in his body. He walked straight back into his practice area. The knights turned to look at him. They all simultaneously felt something from their sword hearts. It was their intuition telling them that this was not the same Phoenix as before. He had changed. His sword heart had become powerful. Even those who did not have the intuition of swordsmen could feel this intrinsic change. It all started when he unsheathed his sword. Then, with one swift movement, he swung it towards the straw target tens of meters away from him. Light flashed, before a single horizontal line appeared on the target's waist. Its upper half slowly fell onto the ground, cleanly severed. Wow, that's as powerful as some of the famous knights. How is he in the outer layer of the practice area? That's Sir Phoenix, right? Isn't he supposed to be injured? Yeah, that's weird. When he tried that earlier this morning, he couldn't even cut a single strand of straw. What changed when he went away? It was at this moment that Phoenix took out something from his ring pocket dimension. It was a red box containing multiple cardboard ice cream cones. The eye-catching emblem on the side of the strange delicacy caught some people's attention. That's McTony's. It's the restaurant that's very popular nowadays. He's eating that. Phoenix took a spoon and began eating chocolate ice cream leisurely. Some people thought this was strange. Most of the knights here consumed only sponsored medicinal pills and herbs. Rarely did companies sponsor these knights to eat food, much less a dessert. Empowered by this ice cream, Phoenix raised his sword and was about to swing it to his new target, when all of a sudden, he stopped in his tracks. An icy slash traveled from his side, eventually hitting one of Phoenix's straw targets. Upon contact, the dummy turned into a block of ice that shattered into a million little pieces. "Sorry, Phoenix. I thought you were having trouble with that," said one of the swordsmen beside him. Phoenix recognized him. The man was one of the people who had been bullying him ever since his accident. Usually, Phoenix would keep to himself and ignore the fellow in the hopes of him losing his interest. But today was different. He took a single scoop of ice cream and downed it before raising his sword and swinging it with a casual attitude. A fiery eagle manifested in the air, crying out as it flew towards the unsuspecting swordsman to his side. Chapter 1129 Amazing Ice Cream. Chapter 1129 Amazing Ice Cream. The fiery eagle slash traveled through the air like an apex predator, hunting its target with absolute viciousness. The bully swordsman felt the heat coming down onto him. But this was impossible. Phoenix was supposed to be a cripple. His ability power should only be limited to the 4th stage of the body formation realm. Yet, that slash was definitely in the same realm as the 7th stage. Kya! The bully screamed, dodging out of the way. But it seemed that his actions weren't that much needed at all. The eagle was never intended to target him. It was intended to target the straw dummy in front of him. The eagle crashed into the straw target, completely disintegrating it into white dust that scattered into the air. And in that moment, everything stopped. That power was unlike anything that Phoenix had ever produced before. In short, it was powerful. Its intensity was even comparable to that of the knights like Sir Arthur and the others. This was evidenced by the fact that Phoenix gathered all attention to him. Each and every one of their sword hearts were beating wildly, with their intuition telling them that Phoenix was not an opponent that they should take lightly. Of course, there was only one conclusion people could take from this. Phoenix was cured of his long-lasting injury. How is his sword heart functional? I thought there was no cure for that. That's what everyone thought too. But clearly they were wrong. Has he been hiding this power all along? Unlikely. If he wanted to surprise others, then he would have revealed this power tomorrow. Immediately, the conglomerates and the upper echelons began a frantic discussion about Phoenix. This show of power was enough to take their attention, which meant that now, Phoenix was a worthy knight to sponsor. After all, Phoenix was a proper genius before he had his accident. He was being discussed on the same level as Sir Arthur. And if his sword heart truly was cured, then that meant that Phoenix was now an unmistakable treasure. He was a diamond in the rough. The Zentmeister Patriarch whispered to his employee, "Do everything you can to get Phoenix into our sponsor program. I have a feeling that he's going to be big in the competition tomorrow." And after a few minutes, his employee came back to him with some bad news. "Sir, he's already sponsored." The Zentmeister Patriarch frowned. "Who?" That question was soon answered when Phoenix began eating spoonfuls of chocolate ice cream from the takeout bag. The Reborn Company. The other conglomerates and upper echelons were flabbergasted when they discovered this. Why was the Reborn Company so lucky every time? They happened upon a new technological discovery many times before, and now they seemed to discover about Phoenix's fixed sword heart before anyone else. How were they doing it? Phoenix felt good as he swung his sword. The movements that he felt awkward doing before were now nothing more than a simple, fluid swing. He felt free. "Yo, Phoenix!" He turned around and saw his friends approach him. They were knights too. But unlike most who abandoned him when he had his accident, this small group of friends were the only ones who stayed by his side. They were loyal to him even when he was at his lowest. They trained with him even when it seemed that he was untrainable. "You look great, Phoenix. What happened?" Is your sword heart really fixed? How can you use ability power that well? You better have not sold your soul to a devil to do this. Phoenix laughed at his friend's insinuation. He did meet a devil, but he didn't have to sell his soul to fix his sword heart. You want to know how I fixed my sword heart? It's thanks to this. He showed them the cone of chocolate ice cream. They looked at him as if he had completely lost his mind. Is that food? I saw that before. That's a dessert from the McTony's restaurant. Phoenix, you can't be serious. Why are you crediting a dessert for your recovery? Are you trying to hide some experimental medicine panacea that you can't discuss anywhere else? Of course, the best way for them to truly understand the truth was to experience it themselves. Try it out. You'll see, he said. Now, if these weren't Phoenix's friends, he wouldn't have told them about this cheat code. After all, just consuming this chocolate ice cream would immediately boost someone's ability power by almost a single level. He gave them each a cone, and they looked at the dessert with doubt and confusion. It wasn't until one of them finally took the leap and ate a spoonful did he finally understand what Phoenix meant. What? His outburst caught everyone's attention. He didn't mind that. He quickly brought out his sword and swung it forwards, a great gale of wind suddenly manifesting into a dragon. The dragon roared until it hit the straw dummy, which quickly burst and sent millions of straw strands everywhere. Whoa! Exclaimed the spectators. Who is he? Why is a random knight suddenly manifesting a power equal to that of the tournament favorites? Then, it was at that moment when another knight suddenly burst out with a new power slash, destroying a nearby straw dummy by turning it into stone and crumbling under the wind. What? Another one? The next knight began eating chocolate ice cream, and he too exhibited the same symptoms. This is absolutely crazy. What is happening over there? It wasn't just one or two or three. It was at this point when people realized that something must have caused this sudden change in power. And some of the sharp-eyed spectators were able to realize that whenever a knight exploded with unprecedented power, it was always preceded by him eating that swirly dessert that they kept on eating. Could it be that? Is it because of this ice cream? What? No way. You're crazy. No, look. They keep on eating that ice cream. Isn't it weird that they're doing that while training? They wouldn't do that unless they know that it benefits their session. As much of a fantastical guess that was, some people couldn't help but see the connection between power and the dessert. And as the time passed, and these groups of knights alongside Phoenix kept on producing extraordinary power, people began to believe the story. That ice cream must be the reason why they became stronger. Where did they get that from? That's from the McTony's restaurant. Hey, can you reserve my seat? I gotta order that for myself now. Even if the chocolate ice cream didn't work, the fact that these knights were eating it so publicly meant that the spectators were going to correlate the two whether they wanted to or not. That was just how human psychology worked. If their favorite athlete used a certain product, they would think that product was a part of the reason why they became so good at their sport. That's what the conglomerates and the upper echelon companies depended on. That's how they sold their products. But there was one stark difference between their products and the Reborn company products. It's that Michael's products worked. As the hours passed, Michael found a huge uptick of people ordering chocolate ice cream from their kiosks. It was also very conducive to their plan that there was a kiosk conveniently near the nightly court where people could order their food. Reborn delivery drivers went into overdrive as they had to deliver thousands upon thousands of ice cream cones to these curious spectators. At one point, ice cream cones even surpassed the sales of McTony's chicken. As the day wound down, a large portion of people watching the practice area had an ice cream cone in their hands. They found the dessert to be very refreshing, especially during this hot summer day. And of course, this earned the ire of the anti-automobile faction among the upper echelons. Now, it probably had to be renamed as the anti-Reborn faction since they knew they had lost the automobile war long ago. This is supposed to be our time to take back customers. How is the Reborn company gathering more tokens than us? It's all because of those knights. Now, the spectators were deluded into thinking that the ice cream could somehow give them power. It does. The group of upper echelon patriarchs turned to the person who just spoke. What? It works. I tried it out myself. The chocolate ice cream increases ability power. Immediately, the old men in the room turned silent, and a few seconds later, they commanded their employees to verify this information. It wasn't long before they all had ice cream in their hands. Chapter 1130 Inside Man. Chapter 1130 Inside Man. They all simultaneously began eating ice cream, and immediately, they felt their own magnetic hearts start to beat out of rhythm. It was exhibiting a new sense of power that they couldn't even contain themselves. What? How is this possible? Now, it must be prefaced that the increase in power that they received was only about a 1% to 3% increase. It wasn't big, but the fact that it could increase their ability power was an impressive feat in and of itself. After all, they knew just how impossible it was to create a consumable that could do this kind of effect. They spent years and millions upon millions of sand dollars trying to find a way to concoct a medicine or a pill that could increase ability power. It was possible. However, the cost to do so was so high that they couldn't possibly mass manufacture them for all of their employees. But clearly, this limitation was not there for the Reborn company. They somehow found a way to create a new product that boosted magnetic power and manufacture tens of thousands of them in a single day. They saw more than half of the people in the spectators eating ice cream. Ugh! How are they doing this? We must stop them. This will create a tremendous change in the feast. They'll be able to get the market for the knights. Slurp slurp. While these group of patriarchs were frantically trying to find a solution, someone among them was busy eating ice cream by himself. What are you doing? The man guiltily smiled at his fellow patriarchs. Sorry. It was too delicious. Are you kidding? The Reborn company is our enemy. Don't you see what happened to the TriStar company? If we don't stop them while they are still a fledgling, then we'll quickly get kicked out of the upper echelons. Despite this, the man still held on to the ice cream in his hands. Gentlemen, I think it's time for us to consider the truth. There is no way we are going to stop the Reborn company's momentum, much less destroy their growth. What? The man stood up, gaining confidence. When you came to me about the automobile, I thought you were right. I thought automobiles would destroy our industry and will experience a drought unlike any before. But I quickly found out that that's not the truth. I'm still standing. Once I began using automobiles for my business, I found that I was able to expand our growth at a pace that wasn't even possible before. It was at that point that I realized that maybe the automobiles weren't that bad as we thought. Maybe it wouldn't be that bad if the Reborn company were to continue their business. The other patriarchs couldn't say anything with the man's passionate confession. After all, they too found that their fearmongering wasn't that close to the truth. Life with Reborn products wasn't that bad. Even their business wasn't experiencing that much of a loss as they thought. So what are you saying? We should stop antagonizing the Reborn company? Don't you remember what happened to our brother in the TriStar company? The man shook his head. It is unfortunate that that happened to him. But let's be honest. He put that onto himself. If he just adapted to the current trend and pivoted to using automobiles, then he wouldn't have found himself in that situation. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't fight back against the Reborn company. We absolutely should. Competition amongst companies will always benefit the market. But what I'm saying is that we shouldn't act in bad faith against them. We shouldn't be plotting like some kind of third-rate villain. We're grown men. We're owners of upper echelon companies. We shouldn't be ganging up on a lower echelon company like Reborn. It's unbecoming of us. The man stood up, taking his ice cream cone with him. I am quitting this group, he said. I suggest you all think about this as well. Maybe, just maybe, if we try and cooperate with the Reborn company, we may partake in their blessings. And with that, the man left, leaving the other patriarchs to think about his words. A seed of doubt was planted within them. Some decided to side with Reborn, some decided to be neutral, while some were still adamant in their destruction. The patriarch who left the meeting quickly went back to his private automobile. He got into the back seat, and as soon as he closed the door, he immediately bowed to someone sitting next to him. I have done as you asked, the patriarch said. Good, said a violet slime. It was none other than the mischievous slime. Fudge. Are my actions in line with the will of the Iron Maiden? The patriarch asked. Yes, yes. She will be very proud of your actions. That is good. I think that I was able to convince some of the upper echelon patriarchs as well. Only time will tell. Fudge jumped atop the patriarch's head. As a reward for your good behavior, I shall send a truckload of chocolate ice cream to your company, Fudge promised. Immediately, the man's face lit up in excitement. I am most grateful for your gift. The 5th day of the feast soon came to a close. Michael, Castell, and the rest of McTony's staff all gathered at the cashier counter. The maid CEO took a deep breath. For today's sales, we have gathered a total of, everyone held their breaths, 50,284,397 tokens in total. Immediately, the whole restaurant rejoiced in celebrations. This was another amazing accomplishment. Michael, too, was very happy with this result. After all, they only expected to earn about 12 million today because of the much-anticipated swordsman and knight practice session. But thankfully, they found an unexpected treasure in the chocolate ice cream. The Phoenix sponsor bore great fruit. His unexpected show of power allowed ice cream to be sold at an unprecedented number. Chapter 1131 6th Day. Chapter 1131 6th Day. In terms of pure single-day token income, McTony's restaurant was ranked in the top 10. Earning 50 million tokens in a single day was not a bad feat at all. And if they had started with this kind of income every single day, then the Reborn company would surely secure the top 10th spot in the feast. However, the fact that this only happened on the 5th day meant that they were already severely backed up from the very start. During the first day, they didn't even sell a single token. Of course, it was still incredibly impressive that their growth was almost exponential. Each day, they grew by a factor of 10. And if one were to look at it purely from a numbers perspective, it wouldn't be strange at all if they ended up earning 100 million tokens in a single day. But of course, due to the fact that the swordsman exhibition match happened to occur during the 5th day meant that they wouldn't be able to reach that number no matter what they did. Thankfully, they found the solution. With the chocolate ice cream proving to be a bestseller, they were able to take back customers that they lost to the exhibition match. In fact, this may be an opportunity to get even more. Michael and the rest of the Rebornian staff awoke early in the morning to prepare for the 6th day of the feast. At this point, almost everyone was sleep-deprived. Due to the nature of food preparation, the chefs only had about 3 to 4 hours of sleep every day. The advertisers also felt exhausted, both physically and mentally. If it weren't for their increased health because they were magnetics, then they would have collapsed from overexhaustion by the 3rd day. But thankfully, as magnetics, they were able to use this opportunity to make themselves much more powerful than before. Michael was overjoyed to find out that they were all in need of a new batch of Godforge pieces. Everyone leveled up by a single stage. If any other magnetic found out about this incredible progression, they would quickly denounce it as fake or a lie. After all, at the start of this feast, the Rebornians were only mortals. Yet by the 6th day, some of them were in the 4th stage already. That kind of progress was impossible. But forged by the kiln of the competitive feast, they were able to achieve an unprecedented amount of level up that made even Michael impressed. This advancement came just in time, Michael said to his Rebornians. Today is going to be much harder than all the previous workdays combined. It's the penultimate day of the feast. The companies are going to be that much more competitive to try and advance up the ranks before the final day. Conversely, the customers are going to be harder to convince. At this point, they will be sick of eating the same food they've eaten for an entire week. That is why we have added more choices in our menu. This means more work for you chefs. But I trust that you can all deliver. Tony, Remy, and the other chefs tipped their hats towards him. They were more than ready. They were excited. Remy, how was your project? Yesterday, Michael had Remy completely focus his attention on the creation of the new chocolate recipe. The current chocolate ice cream worked great. It provided a 1 to 3% increase in ability power to anyone who consumed it for the entirety of half an hour. Of course, some may think that that percentage was low. That's because it was. And that was on purpose. For their mass production of chocolate ice cream, that inferior chocolate recipe was more than enough. But for their personal use, Michael wanted more. It would be an advantage that only they were privy to. Bro Mike, I'm sorry. I was only able to improve the recipe by 10%. Michael's eyes widened. That was already good enough. Now, if they started manufacturing this new recipe for chocolate ice cream, then it would now increase ability power by nearly 15%. And the best part about this was Remy's ability power. Since it was his own, completely unique recipe, this meant that it was subject to his power. Every chocolate ice cream he made would completely be infallible to any changes. The hot sun couldn't melt it. Water won't wash it away. Even after dropping it on the ground, it would still remain as pristine as it was before. This completely solved the problem of ice creams back in his previous life. Back then, during the hot summer heat, one would need to eat ice cream quickly or else risk it melting in your hands. And if one were to have it be delivered in your home, then it was probably already melted before you even received it. This new recipe had none of that limitation. Shiina, can you contact Phoenix and have him try out our new recipe? Michael asked. The white-scaled dragonborn nodded. Very well, Lord Michael. Oh, and call Jaka too. He's supposed to be fighting in the exhibition match. He may have forgotten. Shiina smiled, but her eyes were nowhere near happy. I'll make sure he properly prepares himself. The Colosseum erupted in cheers. Finally, today was the day the protégé of the Heavenly Sword Knight would be crowned. Of course, since this was an important event for the Order, the knights from the other paths also took this chance to visit New Sparta. In an unprecedented event, for heavenly knights were present under one territory. The sword, the axe, the rapier, and the shooter. They came with them their own army of knights and followers. What the hell happened here? Asked one of the knights. What are these metal vehicles? They knew not of the technological advancements Reborn had made. And of course, they were more than curious once they found out who was responsible for these innovations. Chapter 1132 Exhibition Tournament. Chapter 1132 Exhibition Tournament. The 6th day of the feast finally came to be. Conglomerates and upper echelon companies found themselves on the back foot. They thought that the swordsman exhibition was going to be their fortunate blessing from the heavens. A chance for them to finally put the Reborn company back to where they belonged. But the exact opposite happened. Somehow, they were able to put their products on the forefront of every discussion. Chocolate ice cream became a bestseller almost instantly. Of course, one of those reasons was Phoenix's miraculous recovery. He, who was said to be a cripple who couldn't even hold his own sword correctly, was now showing off with the same amount of power and skill as the top knights said to be the frontrunners for the exhibition. But that wasn't all. It was also rumored that the chocolate ice cream had an intrinsic property of increasing one's power by a tiny amount. Of course, not many people believed this. A consumable dessert that only cost 1 token was going to have the same effect as an expensive herbal pill? It didn't make sense. But it only took one taste for people to realize the truth. And from there, the rumor began to spread far and wide, eventually reaching the new arrivals. The Order of the Heavenly Knights had finally dispatched some of their members to New Sparta in order to oversee the competition by the Heavenly Swordmistress. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, after all. And from that opportunity, the sharks smelled blood. The upper echelon companies and the conglomerates immediately began planning their schemes in order to somehow get these knights into their side. And they weren't only targets these businessmen were after. They wanted the business of the beast folks. Beast folks had been noticeably absent during the feast. After all, the food that the companies prepared were all made to be consumed by humans. Beast folk were not interested in eating those. Many beast folks like the mermen had specific criteria for their diet. For example, they ate only krill and sea vegetables. The werewolves liked to hunt their food. Perhaps the only beast folk who could partake in the feast were the beast folks. They ate whatever they wanted. However, they disliked the thought of lining up in queues and walking amongst other people. So, the conglomerates and the upper echelons had to cater to their wishes and specifically have their own chefs create food directly in the Draconian towers. In short, they were doing all that they could to climb up high in the rankings before the eventual final day. But it was never enough. That was why they had to do something drastic. They had to use their nascent spirit magnetics. Michael and the rest of the Rebornian staff all waited intently at one of the VIP sections in the Colosseum. The Heavenly Swordmistress herself gave them this area as a way of thanks, which was very much appreciated. Finally, the exhibition tournament started. Banners waved all around the Colosseum. Crowds cheered at the top of their lungs. The smell of sweat and determination wafted over the entire area. The announcer of the competition shouted, "Are you ready?" The crowd answered back with a resounding, "Yes." For the first match of our tournament, we have the person who made the miraculous comeback, the very person who everyone counted out, Sir Phoenix. The Rebornian VIP area erupted into cheers as Sir Phoenix eventually made his way onto the arena. Facing him is a person who is considered to be one of the front runners of this entire event. The swordsman of the mighty Penteveral. The wielder of the two-pronged sword, Sir Berkia. On the other side of the arena, a large armored knight stepped forwards. He was very tall, about 6.5 feet in height. And if that wasn't intimidating enough, his size was also quite large for a swordsman. Michael noted that Sir Berkia looked like one of those professional bodybuilders back on Earth. And the fact that he was also wearing a lot of armor on him made him way bigger than he was supposed to be. The two looked like a recreation of the famous story, David and Goliath. Sir Phoenix's opponent is a man who uses strength above all else. He will probably try to overwhelm Phoenix with brutal strikes, said Shiina. Michael used his drone and assessed the Goliath. Sir Berkia was in the 7th stage of the body formation realm, the same as Phoenix. On paper, it looked like an even fight. However, he noticed Sir Berkia's ability power. Undying Stone. Upon standing still, the user will become imperviable to any physical, fire, and explosive attacks. This knight was the perfect counter to Sir Phoenix. His ability power would make Phoenix's fiery eagle useless. And of course, Phoenix was still burdened by his heart problems. The ice cream didn't solve it completely. It only allowed him to temporarily suppress it. So, if the fight surpassed 30 minutes, then the chocolate ice cream's effects could wear off entirely. Phoenix could try and eat ice cream during the fight, but even a millisecond of vulnerability could be the difference between victory or defeat. But if all things went to plan, it wouldn't go that far. "Ready, fighters?" The announcer raised his hand. The moment he let it down, the knights were free to fight. Meanwhile, as this was happening, the knights from the order watched with curious looks on their faces. "Phoenix? Master, isn't this the guy who's had a heart problem?" asked a man who had a rapier on his lap. A large, obese woman nodded. "Yes, I can see the scar on his heart." The young man clicked his tongue. Sir Berkia must be a lucky guy then. If they're pairing him to this guy so early in the game, then it's a free pass to the second round. His master remained silent. But on the other side of the partition, a few knights couldn't help but add onto the young man's words. Don't you know what happened yesterday? They said that he recovered. He is able to use ability power like the accident never happened. The young man with the rapier was intrigued. Really? I thought that that was just a rumor. No, sir. We saw it ourselves. After he ate that chocolate ice cream, he and the other knights exploded with amazing power. Of course, they'd heard about this supposed ice cream. This Reborn company must be a rich company if they're willing to throw away such a precious medicinal pill like that. Master, how are they selling an item that can increase ability power? The obese woman stayed silent, keeping her eyes on the fight. Her student shrugged. Meh. Even so, this fight is already over. Isn't that so, master? This time his master nodded. Yes, Sir Berkia has the advantage. This match is simply too in favor for him. The knights who interjected couldn't help but frown as they heard that. After all, they just told them that Sir Phoenix had recovered from his heart problems. He could use it just like any other knight. And yesterday he proved that he could have been a true prodigy if he was able to practice like the rest. Aren't they equal now? I say the outcome is more like 50-50. This time the obese woman shook her head. Unless something happens, Sir Berkia will win 100%. Phoenix's sword heart isn't fixed. It's just temporarily usable. This means that he could never be able to improve it anymore. The fight started. Immediately, Sir Berkia raised his hand and reached towards his back. A large two-handed sword materialized out of nowhere. It seemed to be made out of stone, one that was weathered with lots of cracks in its surface. Some parts even had moss growing on them. But one would be an idiot if they thought this weapon was useless. Oh my god! That's the Eternal Garden Sword, made by one of the master Hephaestus blacksmiths. Not just his sword. All of his stone armor is made by one of the best blacksmiths all around. It's made out of Damascus steel. For God's sake. Sir Phoenix immediately dodged out of the way as the gargantuan sword tried to strike where he stood. The ground exploded into a million pieces, turning the area into a clouded space. Suddenly, an eagle cried out. Sir Berkia saw a flaming eagle headed straight for him. He smirked, stopping his momentum completely into a standstill. Immediately, a diva appeared above him. A stone gargoyle. Sir Berkia's entire body turned into stone. The eagle crashed into the statue, yet it stood still, unwavering. Cuckoo, that won't work, said Sir Berkia. It's impressive that you are able to restore your ability power at the 7th stage. But that just means we're equal in power. You'll never be able to surpass the natural defenses I have against your power. Sir Phoenix frowned. What he said was true. Things looked bleak, until he looked towards the Rebornians on the VIP area to the side. There, he saw the white-scaled Dragonborn shouting towards him. Remember, she said. Remember the roller coaster. Chapter 1133 Roller Coaster Therapy. Chapter 1133 Roller Coaster Therapy. Sir Phoenix remembered what he did yesterday. Soon after he was recruited into the Reborn company, he was suddenly thrust upon a new world that he hadn't even seen before. They teleported him to the nation of Reborn. That's right, teleported. To the very edge of the royal continent on the King's region. As far as Phoenix knew, even mystic masters couldn't do teleportation magic that easily. Yet these Rebornians did it quite easily. An orc, no less. They briefly introduced him to the wonders of the nation of Reborn. And since they didn't have much time to waste yesterday, they could only show him an eagle-eye view of the entire nation. There, he saw towering buildings that almost reached the skies. Roads as smooth as silk. Humans used some kind of magic that wasn't magic at all. And if they weren't pressed for time, he would have definitely wanted to explore more of this territory during his free time. Instead, Shiina and the Dragonborns led him towards the outskirts of the nation, where he saw a giant squid-like monster staring right at him from above the clouds. He was so scared that he almost unsheathed his sword. Don't worry, he doesn't bite. Well, that's not actually true, ha ha ha, Shiina said. But as it turned out, the monster was nothing more than a statue. However, Phoenix still kept his guard up as they moved closer to this new location. Somehow, he felt that this monstrous gigantic leviathan creature looked alive. His sword heart was telling him that this statue carried some sort of power that could very well be a danger to his own life. The fact that there were multiple people screaming to the top of their lungs as they entered its mouth didn't help. What is this? Where am I? Michael smiled as he gestured towards the Reborn amusement park. This is where you'll be training for the tournament tomorrow, Michael said. When the Rebornians mentioned practice, he thought that they would let him face some kind of opponent. Or at the very least, they would lead him to a place to meditate. But he would have never expected them to lead him to such a public place where screaming was the norm. I'm sorry, but I simply cannot do this. I need to practice my sword skills, he said. Michael raised his hand and stopped him. You can't improve that much in less than a day. It's useless. And besides, your main problem is your sword heart, not your sword skills. Phoenix frowned. I thought my heart was cured? No. The chocolate ice cream is only a temporary cure. What you really need is to cure your sword heart. And what's the best way to do that? Well, it's to stimulate it. What Michael said was true. Just like with building muscle, one must use it to its full extent first before the sword heart grows. However, the problem with Phoenix was that his heart was injured because of an accident. His heart was very weak and vulnerable, and any kind of use of ability power would quickly injure his own heart. So, if he tried to do any kind of sword practice like normal, he would only be injuring his own heart. That's why after all these years, he hadn't recovered from his injury yet. Every time he tried to use his sword skills, he was inadvertently re-triggering the injury in his heart. But if he didn't try and practice his sword skills, then his sword heart would atrophy by itself and would weaken even more. It was quite ironic. The only cure for his disease was the very reason for it in the first place. That was why every single apothecary that Phoenix went to felt that his condition was incurable. There was no way to get over that paradox. Of course, no one knew that Michael had already solved this problem before. Nixie also had that same problem. The only way she could cure her heart was if she stimulated it. But the act of stimulating the heart only exacerbated the problem. And Nixie wouldn't have survived if Michael hadn't figured out the solution. And that was none other than the roller coaster. With the roller coaster, the rider would experience a very hectic time as the coaster went through different obstacles, making them feel as if their life was in danger. But that's the thing. It only makes them think that they weren't actually in danger. So, this was the perfect way to stimulate Phoenix's heart so that it could regrow. You don't have to do anything. Just enjoy the ride, Michael said as he pushed Phoenix into the roller coaster. The clueless knight had no choice but to follow his sponsor's words. He had no idea what he was in for. Just then, the sound of metal creaking echoed out into the area, letting the riders know that the ride had started. The people behind Phoenix screamed a mixture of fear and excitement. Phoenix frowned at them. Why were they so worked up? Finally, the roller coaster started its ascent upwards. And the rest was history. Arg! Phoenix's shouts took everyone by surprise. Even his opponent, Sir Berkia, had to stop his movement as he was startled by that shout. What's wrong with you? Berkia asked. Phoenix didn't look good. The man was sweating and his face was pallid and without color. It looked like the man had just seen a ghost. Humph. Whatever. I'll make this fast to spare you the trouble, said Sir Berkia. He raised his giant two-handed stone sword into the air, swinging it with tremendous force towards Phoenix. The clouds above split. And soon after, a large ravine exploded and appeared onto the arena. A dust cloud obstructed everything. And a few seconds later, finally, everyone saw the outcome of the clash. Sir Berkia held his sword with both hands as it tried to split Phoenix in half. However, Phoenix's sword stopped it clean in the air. Chapter 1134 Fear-Driven. Chapter 1134 Fear-Driven. Everyone stood up on their feet as they saw the outcome of this clash. Phoenix still stood tall, holding his sword horizontally as the tremendous weight of Berkia's stone sword bore down on him vertically. This wasn't supposed to happen. After all, it was clear to everyone here that Sir Berkia was the stronger of the two. Physically. Yes, some could argue that Phoenix wasn't that bad when it came to swordplay. But that was just it. Swordplay. This clash was purely made through strength. If Sir Berkia truly was stronger than Phoenix, then he should have been easily able to push Phoenix down with his sword, even if Phoenix used all of his strength to defend. Yet that was not what happened. Phoenix remained standing, still looking calm and composed compared to Sir Berkia, who seemed to be completely shocked about what was happening. Not only could he not push Phoenix, he was also starting to feel his own stone sword wavering. This was not supposed to happen. Unnerved, Sir Berkia retrieved his sword and jumped back a few spaces. His hand still shook from the backlash. And if it weren't from his armored gloves, everyone would have seen his arm shaking. How? No way Phoenix has that much power. Even the other knights watching this from afar couldn't help but express their surprise. After all, compared to the general public, they knew much more about the technicalities of being a knight. First of all, Sir Phoenix was not known for his strength. His ability power came from a fiery eagle that attacked his opponents from afar. And Sir Berkia was a bruiser. He thrived in a close fight. So, common sense dictates that Sir Berkia should have easily defeated Phoenix with that clash. This could only mean one thing. Sir Phoenix's sword heart was much stronger than Sir Berkia's. The strength of a swordsman came directly from their sword heart. If one were to waver even a little bit, their sword wouldn't be able to cut through a single blade of grass, even if their body was filled with hardened muscles. But it was widely known that Phoenix's sword heart was damaged. Yes, he was somehow able to find a cure to let him use his ability power. But a healthy sword heart would always be stronger than one who had only recently recovered. How could Sir Phoenix have healed his sword heart and let it grow in such a short amount of time? Interesting, said an obese woman among the knights. Master, can you enlighten me as to how this is possible? The only possibility I could think of is that Sir Phoenix had been faking his injury this whole time. The obese woman kept her eyes on Sir Phoenix. Somehow, he was able to find a way to stimulate a sword heart without stressing it. I'm sorry, but that's not possible, Master. Yet it is. The obese woman's gaze then wandered over to the side of the Rebornian VIP section. Her eyes gleamed with excitement. Yeah, go Phoenix. The Rebornian camp celebrated at Phoenix's show of power. Michael was very glad to see that their training yesterday had paid off tremendously. First, he was a bit worried. After all, yesterday was not as smooth as any of them would have hoped. Sir Phoenix, as it turned out, had an extreme fear of heights. After he went on the roller coaster once, he immediately exited out of the car and vomited right out in the open. And after that, Sir Phoenix didn't want to ride the roller coasters anymore. Michael was at a loss. He wasn't expecting this much of a reaction from a knight. He thought all of them were brave. He even thought that the normal roller coaster was a bit too normal for Sir Phoenix. He was very thankful that Shiina convinced him that they started with this. If not, Phoenix would have probably passed out on the Cthulhu ride before it even finished. Because of that, he thought that their plan had failed. This was the only way that they were going to grow his sword heart. However, Sir Phoenix felt that the roller coaster was too much. He was so adamant in not going to the roller coaster that he only ended up riding it a max of 2 times before he completely gave up. Because of that, Michael thought it was doomed. But at the very last second, Shiina shouted to Sir Phoenix and made him remember the roller coaster. And once he did, all those extreme feelings he had for the ride all came back to him. That must have stimulated his heart to the point where it did grow at an accelerated rate. When Phoenix's face turned pale, it wasn't because of Berkia. It was because he remembered the roller coaster, and in comparison to facing that high-octane ride, fighting against Sir Berkia seemed like child's play. So, at the moment when Berkia attacked, Phoenix's heart was as calm as he could be. His sword heart produced enough ability power for him to actually triumph against Berkia's overwhelming strength. Looks like he's going to win, Yuna said from Michael's side. Yeah, but maybe he needs a little bit more of a push. Michael leaned on the railing before shouting at Phoenix. If you win this, you don't have to go to the roller coaster. And upon hearing those words, Phoenix suddenly stood straight up. With a face still pale and completely terrified, he raised his sword and summoned the fiery eagle diva above his head. With a single swing, the eagle flew at Berkia with an insane speed. Berkia was still unnerved. But once he saw the attack coming, he stood completely still. His body turned to impermeable stone. And soon, the fiery eagle clashed onto the statued Berkia, dispersing the flames into nothingness. Berkia moved, the stone in his skin turning liquid and returning to his body. He tried to counterattack, but noticed Phoenix missing from his sight. He turned his head, only to see Phoenix already on the edge of the arena, sword about to be returned to its sheath. A second later, blood spurted out of Berkia's body. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.